Was there a book that you read in your life that inspired you, that made an impact on you, that changed the course of your future forever? Think about one and hold that vision in your mind during this speech. At the end of the speech, I'm going to challenge you to consider what kind of an impact that book made on you. And maybe you'll realize that, in fact, your world was forever changed with the power of a book. In front of my desk, in front of the computer, on the windowsill, I have a stack of books, all of my books. The ones that I wrote by myself, the ones that I contributed to, and the one that I wrote with my daughter. On top of that stack, I have this little printed frame that says, "You discover you have wings when you open a book." Now, I imagine that the person who wrote this frame, this print, meant that when you open a book to read, you discover that you have the ability to fly. And it's true. Books are the airplane, the train, the open road. They are the destination and the journey. And the greatest thing is, you don't even have to leave home. I'm going to tell you about my own journey with books and how books both literally and figuratively gave me wings. Books were my safety and solace when I was a child, and books were my salvation in my rebellious teenage years. And books were the secret to my success in my adult life. Safety, solace, salvation, and success, all by way of books? Yes, they are the most powerful tool in anyone's arsenal, and books saved my life on more than one occasion. One of my absolute favorite storytellers, Neil Gaiman, says it best: a book is a dream you hold in your hand. When I was little, I would hide under the blankets in my bed with a flashlight in my hand so I could stay up past my bedtime to read these books. My parents, they were always screaming and fighting with each other. They split up and then they would get back together. One would move to a different country, the other would follow. They would move again, they would scream and fight again, and they would argue some more. I was in 7 different schools by the time that I was 10, in 3 different countries in 4 different cities. Those were turbulent years, but one thing was constant. Those books under my blanket were the closest I felt to a feeling of safe family. They never let me down. I read everything I could get my hands on. At first, I would take it from school, and then I would borrow it from the public library. I loved all the classic books: Anne of Green Gables, The Secret Garden, anything by Roald Dahl, or The Jungle Book. I mean, I loved books. I especially loved The Diary of Anne Frank. When I was 12 years old, I was obsessed with anything Anne Frank. I wanted to be just like her. I mean, it helped that 12-year-old me looked a lot like the picture on the front of the book. And it was also that my grandmother had told me that she was cousins with Anne Frank. And I couldn't even imagine a girl my age who was living through such horrendous circumstances. And it made everything that I was going through putting it into perspective for me. The most important reason that I absolutely loved Anne Frank was that she had the power to change the world with just a pen and a paper. And with her unwavering optimism that humans truly are good at heart. I wanted to be just like her. So I began to write. Just like her, I began to write in a diary and then short stories and then journaling, all the detailed narratives. I wrote in my diary, I wrote in my journals, I wrote on napkins, I wrote in the back of my homework and in the back of my school books. I wrote everywhere. And by the time I got to high school, my English teacher could see that I have a passion about writing, and she suggested I write for the school yearbook. And in the first couple years, I did just that. Then around 16, the rebellious nature, the rebellious streak of adolescence hit me. And I discovered books like Umberto Eco's In the Name of the Rose and Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha and anything written by Richard Bach. I mean, these books brought me on a journey of questioning what I thought was real, rebelling against everything that I thought was real. I was no longer willing to write in the yearbook the things that the school approved. What I wanted to write were renegade articles, rebellious articles. Like, why did the boys' locker room have more space than the girls' locker room? And why was the smoking section in the front of the school when it should be in the back of the school? Well, the yearbook committee didn't agree to these changes. And of course, this was all in the days before personal computers and emails or texts. So we had to handwrite or type out and then submit it. And when I came to submit, it didn't matter how much I pleaded with them that this is what is actual journalism, they wouldn't hear of it. So I did what any good renegade teenager would do. I started printing out this paper on my little electric keyboard typewriter and would Xerox it at the library and would hand deliver it to the other students. Well, before long, they would Xerox it at the library and pass it on to other friends. And this was what was called viral before things went viral, word of mouth marketing. And of course, then the other students started to ask me to please add in the things that were important to them, like who's having a party and when everyone's getting together for the movies. And I mean, this was real teenage stuff. And of course, it was also the 90s when there was this popular thing going on called raves, which were these underground parties that nobody had heard of taking place in these parking lots or these empty factories, and everyone wanted in on that. I started printing those up as my little paper, and then it exploded. Everybody wanted a little bit of that. Well, eventually, my little paper wound up on the principal's desk. I got called in, and while he congratulated me for my efforts and my journalistic integrity, he also put a dead stop to it. No more distribution of my little paper. Now, I didn't get in trouble for it, and funnily enough, by the end of that year, that same principal wrote in my yearbook, "Write on." And so I did. I started writing on and on and on. That summer I flew to Israel, and I read in that on that flight I had the Celestine Prophecy and I had The Alchemist, and both of those shifted my reality. And I began my career in the airlines because of those two books. I knew that I wanted an unconventional life, to travel and to fly and experience the world and write about it throughout my travels. I mean, quite literally, I opened up those books and discovered that I had wings. I continued to read and expand my mind. I would carry those books in my suitcase, even instead of clothes. And then when I would finish a book, I would leave it somewhere in the world for someone else to pick up while I would go on the hunt for a used bookstore so that I could fill up my suitcase again with more books. And I would also write. And when my mom got sick, those books were my salvation, and the writing was my solace. I would sit by her hospital bed and I would read to her. And then when she got really sick, I would read to her the stories that I wrote. And then after she died, I found solace in writing about her journey in my journal. I felt somehow that the written word connected me to her in a way that the spoken word couldn't. It was my prayer. Eventually, one of the stories that I wrote about my mom's passing and how it feels for our daughter to watch her mother as she died. Well, it was published in a famous anthology of a book anthology, something that you feel good about, like a warm cup of soup. Now, I can't tell you what the name of that book was because it was sold privately and all of us authors are under a non-disclosure agreement, but that time of writing that story had me connected with a story mentor, and it was such an incredible journey that by the end of it, I said, I want to do what you do. And that editor said, yes, I can teach you. And she taught me, she mentored me in how to do that. I fell in love with that process. I felt like I was doing what Anne Frank had inspired me to do. I was changing the world with just a pen and a paper. That story turned into something larger, and helping those aspiring authors to tell their stories, eventually that became their books. Sometimes I would coach them in their stories, and sometimes I would ghostwrite for them, which brings me to my passion today. The success, the secret within the books. Remember at the beginning of my speech? I told you that books were the secret to my success. So not only reading them, but writing them. Because something happens when you write a book, something inside of you changes and your identity changes, and you have the greatest exploration into your own self, better than 10 years on a therapist's chair. I already had 2 books published under my belt as under my own name. When my then 9-year-old daughter turned to me and she said, Mama, I want to write a book with you. Ah, here I was inspiring women all around the world and inspiring people to write their books. And my number one woman inspired me to write a book with her. For that book project with her, I knew I wanted to self-publish it. I knew we wanted it to go fast. I knew we didn't want it to go disappearing into the publishing engine. I wanted her to feel the way that we can do this self-publishing project with velocity, to really feel the impact of it and see how it goes day by day. So we wrote our book in July. It was our Camp Mama project. We wrote every day, and in the afternoons we would go bike riding and swimming and having summer fun. And then we launched it in August. And we became Amazon best-selling authors on the same day that the book launched. The best part is that I watched how my daughter Ella went from a shy, quiet, autistic, silent girl at the end of grade 3 and came back in September as a expressed, confident, not just an author, but a best-selling author when she started grade 4 in September. It completely changed her identity. The way she saw herself was transformed. She was no longer quiet, autistic, and voiceless. She learned that she used her voice in a completely different way. And she wasn't autistic, she was autistic, inspiring awe and artistic. She was fully expressed. After that, I became committed to helping every single person make that transformation in their own lives. If that's the identity shift that can happen in a 9-year-old girl, imagine what it can do for a 29-year-old woman, or a 39-year-old woman, or a 49-year-old man, or a 59-year-old person. It doesn't matter what age. Writing a book transforms you. And that's why I'm committed to simplifying the process. I'm committed to taking away the gatekeepers. I'm committed to taking away the guesswork for people so that they can self-publish for themselves, to pull back the curtains of the veil that have been preventing people from thinking that this is attainable in their own life, to write and to publish their own books in today's world. Because if you think of it, it's kind of like that little paper that I wrote in high school. I mean, today the game has changed, and we don't work on a typewriter anymore, or on a word processor or Xerox. Today, we actually have the ability to reach more people more directly, and all of those people who are waiting for that little paper, all of those people who are waiting for information that is targeted to them, that they want to hear, that they'll be inspired by. There has never been a better time than today to actually write a book. Today, every person should have a book out. 50 years ago, every person had a business card. Today, a business card is put into a purse or put into a pocket, it goes through the wash, nobody remembers. But a book, someone will put that in their nightstand, in their bookshelf, on their desk. They will never forget the impact that you made on their lives. It doesn't matter if it's a print book, an ebook, or an audiobook, or any or all three. I want people to actually have access to the things that they want to do, to read and what needs to be read. I want everyone to be able to be an author and to have that same identity switch that says, I have a voice. I am worthy of being heard. I want all the books that you write to have an impact on that little 9-year-old girl who's hiding in her bed using a flashlight to read, or the 16-year-old girl who's going through rebellion and looking to be inspired, or the young 20-year-old who doesn't know which way to go in their career. You have the power to impact people's lives, to change people's lives, and to impact their success. So when you think about books, don't just think of it from the perspective of the books that have impacted your life, but now transform that view, and start to think about how you can impact other people's lives. Who is waiting for you to inspire them? Who needs to hear from you that you've been through it so that they can feel that they have a voice, that they can be heard, and that they have a place in this world? You discover you have wings when you open up a book. So if we all start to open our books and open our minds and write a book, then not only do we discover we have wings, but we actually have the ability to give others wings to fly.